Hi, come on in, take a seat. If we haven't met before, my name is Kel and I'm a therapist and educator with a special interest in eating disorders. In today's video, I'd like to talk to you about the interplay between social media and eating disorders, with particular focus on how social media can be damaging or triggering. Now, before I get started, I want to be really clear that I'm absolutely not suggesting that social media causes all eating disorders. Eating disorders are complex and multifactorial mental health conditions, and this means that a number of elements needs to come together in order for an individual to develop one, and what these elements are might vary significantly from individual to individual. I'm also not suggesting that social media is entirely negative. Actually, we've seen even more so since the pandemic how important social media can be in staying connected to one another. It can also be part of sharing and accessing information, which is how I'm trying to use it right now, and increasingly as a way to access services such as online therapy. I recently got the opportunity to be involved in a project with BEAT, the UK eating disorder charity, and Loughborough University, which created a video about how those affected by eating disorders might best use social media. I'll actually leave a link to that video down in the description box, along with a link to a blog post that I recently wrote about how we can curate our social media feeds with our mental well-being in mind. Beyond this, a lot of conversations about how social media can be damaging, particularly focus on visual media platforms such as Instagram. The assumption tends to be that the main risk that social media poses is in the form of heavily edited images. We all have access pretty much these days to a camera and the capacity to edit our images on our mobile phone, and therefore when we put images out there or when we consume images that other people have posted, we don't necessarily know whether or not they've been edited, and we could find ourselves comparing ourselves to those images. This can be harmful to our self-esteem. However, I do think that there's something more subtle going on here. It isn't just our images that are edited, it's not just some airbrushing or some filters, but our whole lives are altered when placed upon social media, because we tend to curate what parts of our lives we put out there. I certainly don't post on my own social media platforms about doing the dishes or the hoovering or the more challenging parts of my life, and I don't plan to start to do that either. However, the flip side of that can be that when we look at another person's life or many other people's lives, we might start to question how good our own lives are. We might start to question how good we as people are. Self-esteem is a significant factor in the development of eating disorders, and really what we're talking about here is social media challenging our self-esteem. Self-esteem is about worth and value. How worthy do I feel as an individual, and how much value do I feel I've got to those around me and others? And social media also places upon this likes and shares and comments, and when people see the number of likes and shares and comments, they may take this as validation or rejection of their value and worth. And as you're seeing, hopefully this goes beyond what the simple image is showing and is much subtler. So even though we're starting to talk more about how images are edited, I think there is a much bigger conversation to be had here, and about the reality that social media represents the highlight reel of our lives and isn't a truly accurate representation of what it means to be a human and be living. There have been studies which suggest that the more a person uses social media, or the longer a person stays on social media platforms when using it, the more likely it is to have a negative impact. I'm going to leave a reference below of a study that showed a link between how long a person spends on social media and incidents of depression. However, I would also like to encourage you to view research through a critical lens, and this is something that I think is super important. What do I mean when I say view research through a critical lens? Well, this study appears to show, and with the conclusion that was made, was that more use of social media equaled more chance of depression. However, it is entirely possible that this could be perceived in another way, that maybe those individuals with depression are more likely to spend more time on social media because perhaps they find it difficult to get out and about in the world or have a telephone conversation with a friend or a loved one. What we're talking about here is cause or correlation. Is this piece of research showing that social media causes depression, that social media causes eating disorders, or is it showing that use of social media can be correlated or related to experiences of mental health struggles? And therefore, is it a triggering factor or not? Is it something to be seen as damaging, or is it something to be seen as part of a wider picture? I tend to think that too much of anything isn't a good thing, and that we might be best to ask ourselves why we're spending so much time on social media. Are we spending so much time on social media to fill a space of boredom? Are we spending time comparing ourselves to other people? Are we spending our time on social media because we're stuck in the confines of our houses during a lockdown? And what does that mean? And do we want to do it differently? I guess I'm talking about more active participation in use of social media. But beyond our own profiles and beyond the general consumption of the typical social media content, social media can be damaging in relation to eating disorders in other ways too. You might have heard of pro-eating disorder content before, and this is information out on the internet which encourages people to engage in eating disorder behaviour. And there might even be information on the internet which absolutely isn't intended to be related to eating disorders, but which an individual with an eating disorder might find triggering, such as information about nutrition and calories, information about diets, and generally the way that we look, all of which can be triggering to somebody with an eating disorder. But let's not forget that there is also the potential to access positive information, such as conversations about health at every size, or body positivity, or body neutrality. So for every piece of bad, there is also a piece of good, and I do want to try and show some balance in what I'm talking about here. When it comes to balance, I'm also trying to find my own balance when it comes to the internet and social media. I know that I'm going to have to sit and spend some time editing this video. I know that I'm putting my information in the form of this video out into the world, and I want for the content that I share to be as positive as possible. I would really love that if you're watching this video now and you follow some other positive content, whatever that might be, for you to share that in the comments below for the next person that comes along and watches this video to see. I'd also be interested to hear if there's anything more attached to what I've talked about today that you would like to know more about. I'd really appreciate it if you're finding these videos informative and helpful, if you'd give them a like, perhaps share them with somebody, or even subscribe. Until next time, be kind, be curious, be yourself.